As I boarded the cylinder craft, I remember the entrance of the hull was shaped almost like a pillar, ones you would see in ancient Greek times. The interior of the entrance held a very bright, almost chrome-like substance all around. It reminded me of being inside the emergency room, although more clean and not smelling like medicine. The being that led me inside continued to guide me by walking me further into the craft. I remember slightly glancing back behind me to notice the entrance was now sealed. There were no arches anymore, and the door had just suddenly vanished. It was all a single bright chrome-like color. "Don't be afraid," the gray said as it guided me into a small open room. The room consisted of several things: a silver oval table with a ceiling light extended down, a silver what looked like hospital plate followed by several components hovering beside the table, and another gray occupant behind the table. The second gray was slightly taller than the one whom led me into the room, and this one showed more features than the rest. While I glanced at the other gray, not sure on how I should feel, it almost seemed like they did not want me to notice their true appearance as it gripped the light source from above and blinded me with it for a moment. For the split 5 seconds I made eye contact with the second gray. I remember its skin looking more dark blue with black veins running through its body. Its oval head was much larger than the rest, and its eyes were much more gray in color, rather than the pitch blackness. They placed me onto the table and strapped me down with restraints. I remember feeling very worried, but as soon as that feeling arrived, it vanished. At this point, I figured it was the gray that abducted me, knowing in its own way I was terrified, so it got rid of that feeling. I cannot explain how, but it worked for the most part. Both of the grays glanced over me, all the while holding instruments of some sorts, while I felt something poking my arms, legs, and stomach. The last thing I remember being inside that certain room was noticing both grays staring at each other and shortly nodding to each other while the taller gray blinded me again. However, this time it made me go unconscious. As I awoke, I noticed the surrounding environment had changed. Rather than being inside that operating room, I was now inside a room that held a single window, a chair-like structure, and a metallic door with no doorknob or buttons. I started walking towards the window, noticing the pitch blackness, only to be met with the most beautiful image to date. It was of Earth from far away. Billions of stars surrounded the window as Earth was the center attraction. I happened to notice, however, that we were moving away from the planet, further and further. The door to the room had extended open as the gray entered, noticing I was awake. "Good," it said as it led me out of the room. The doors sealed shut and we began walking around the ship. Glancing at the interior, I noticed there were barely any furniture or mechanisms. It was mostly single machinery being operated by smaller beings. We had passed a certain hallway that included numerous open rooms, all of which ended up being operating rooms for when they abduct us. The gray noticed I had stopped in the middle of the hallway and mentioned, "This is the hallway of horrors. You do not wish to hear the screams of your kind being afraid to our kind. It is frightening." I continued to follow as we came into another room that was much more open and much more occupied. The entrance opened and the first thing you noticed stepping inside was the gigantic window that overlooked the front of the craft. There were multiple controls and machinery being operated by beings that must have been 3 feet tall, upwards to beings who were 7 feet tall. The craft flew by Mars within minutes and soon after the asteroid belt, following Jupiter, and slowly coming to a halt upon arriving to Saturn. These beings have been researching and documenting the large planet, studying its own rings and atmosphere. In a way, they are like us, just highly more advanced. Gray explained to me that they have been keeping track of every planet in our solar system, surprisingly including Pluto, and researching each and every atmosphere for possible civilization events in the near future. The Gray explained that, even while Jupiter and Saturn are nothing but gas giants, there are still unknown extraterrestrials hiding in its atmosphere. Motherships to even larger ships they call extends are constantly hiding throughout the clouds, never being detected. They fear for them in a way due to the potential harmful ways of the reptilians. As much as I would like to say that we visited each planet, it seems Saturn was their last stop before returning myself back home. The ship had landed further behind my house as the Gray led me back safely. The morning sunrise was just now awakening as my house came into view. The first thing I noticed was my sister sitting out on the patio waiting for me. The Gray stopped in its tracks and nodded, signaling its goodbye.